Very good. My talk is based on this book, which is now available from Amazon and Barnes and Noble. It was published by the Military Operations Research Society. I apologize for the theory. One of the questions you may have is, does Helmbold believe in these Lanchester parameters? The Lanchester are supposedly created. No, he does not. But I need some way of motivating my choice of things to look at. Back in the 1960s, I discovered that this was a good way to, very illuminating way to write the solution of the Lanchester-Ossipov equations. In these equations, A is the surviving fraction of the attacker force. D is the surviving fraction of the defender force. The parameter E is called the bitterness parameter, and the parameter mu is called the defender's advantage. When mu is equal to 1, neither side has an advantage. So all the right-hand sides of these equations are equal. If mu is greater than 1, then the attacker's fractional force is drawn down faster than the defender's. So when mu is greater than 1, the defender has an advantage. When mu is greater than 1, the opposite. The defender then has the advantage. It's possible to define a parameter lambda, which would be the bitterness divided by, by the total time duration of the battle, which would be a sort of an average bitterness per unit of time, which is would be a measure of the intensity. From both theoretical and practical considerations, it's possible to develop these approximations. The mu squared is approximately equal to the casualty ratio divided by the force ratio. Another way to write that is the fraction of the casualties to the attacker divided by the fraction of casualties to the defender. And that might be called the fractional exchange ratio. As far as bitterness is concerned, it turns out that for all practical purposes, it's the geometric mean of the attacker's fraction of casualties and the defender's fraction of casualties. That's true even in a battle like up in Iwo Jima, where the casualties for both sides are very high. It's still a very close approximation. So mu is the promised key to victory. One of the first questions is it really the key to victory? At this point, we leave all that theory behind and deal with only the empirical data. What we have here is in the red dot is a moving average of the fraction of battles won by the defender. And in the blue curve is a logistic regression fit to the data. So in this long mean gets up to 0.4, defender has a 90% probability of winning. If it's minus 0.4, he has only a 10% chance of winning. So you can use that key to victory to do a database scan to find out oddball cases where the key to victory shows that the defender won or the attacker won, but the database records the victory to the opposite party. And in not doing it can raise issues about whether the database values are correct. My advice is the historian should report the advantage and bitterness parameter for the battles, and then discuss why they chose one side or the other to be the victor. The other thing we should do is we should teach commanders how to maximize their advantage parameter. We should establish and fund a permanent program to assemble large and highly accurate databases of historical land, sea, and air battles. Then it would have to be a permanent program involving maybe 1 or 2 dozen analysts, including some very experienced practical machine learning and statistical analysis people, supported by an appropriate assemblage of historians and computers. And it has to be at the DoD level, because any lower level will get lost in the scramble. You should use the advantage parameter as a primary objective function or figure of merit to be optimized when designing a forces, equipment, organization, and tactics. And at the National Training Center, we can use the advantage parameter to score trainee performance. We should start a major effort to provide our nation's battlefield commanders with accurate, trustworthy, and timely intelligence regarding their advantage parameter, and conversely to deny that to the enemy. We should initiate a theoretical and empirical efforts to better understand and take into account the effective reinforcements of detachments. I use the key to victory as the basis for an objective and quantitative measure of the quality of generalship, and we should study and refine that, see how well it stands up in practice. Right there is a good idea for an NPGS thesis. I noticed there are cases in history like the Spartans at Thermopylae, Horatio at the gate, the bridge, and so forth, where tactical defeat was deliberately accepted because of strategic benefits, and we should have a special battle category for that. First question: is the bitterness and advantage parameter independent? Basically, the answer is yes, they're independent. I know that this shows a slight trend, but statistically, it's not significant. It's not significantly different from zero. And certainly, there's an immense amount of scatter around that trend line. So that visually, it doesn't even look like it's significant. Time trends. I apologize for the time scale here. It's centered at the year 2000. So 0 is the year 2000. Minus 100, that's 1900. Minus 50 is 1950. Minus 200 is 1800. Minus 300 is 1700. Minus 400 is 1600. So, the advantage parameter, no change for 400 years. There's no revolution in military affairs here. Despite all the changes in strategy and tactics and all this overall. We looked at the rate of change in over 50 years. I chose 50 years because I figure it's about the length of a maximum length of a military career. And I'm looking for changes that would be noticeable during the military career. There's certainly no changes in you for the advantage parameter, or the fractional exchange ratio. Most of these others are a few percent changes. I think they'd be very hard for all but the most perceptive people to notice any changes. And down here, you notice the divorce the pre-World War II from the post-World War II. And what happens is the pre-World War II is up in this area. All the post-World War II is down here. There's been some major change between pre-World War II and post-World War II. And this graph shows it very dramatically. Here, the blue points are the data points for the bitterness versus year. And the yellow points, the orange points are for bitterness after the 1939. And the dashed lines are the trend lines calculated using only those colored dots. So the blue dashed line uses only the blue dots. And the yellow dashed line uses only the yellow dots. So there's basically 1939, which would be right here. That's where a major revolution in military affairs occurred. Nobody has any idea what's going on here. This is an entirely new phenomenon. I can think of as many hypotheses to explain it as anybody else, including that there's something really wrong with the data. But let's suppose for the minute that there isn't really anything wrong with the data, and this is a real effect. That has enormous strategic and planning implications. So one of the first tasks of the proposed analysis group would be to look into this matter and try to figure out what's going on. Battle of Church, day by day. You start out at 0, the Russian tide goes out. And here, somewhere around 12-13 July, the tide ceases to go out. It starts to flow back in.
No, still here.
It's just that TV.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me that I can read all that from a simple graph like that. I can tell an entire course of the battle.
Yeah, it's still here. There's no problem.
Yeah.
I'm not hearing the comments, so I can't respond to it. The Battle of Britain. This is
Says
the
your speaker isn't
other
Because the
on
speaker's on the TV there.
stage
Yeah,
of the
okay.
Battle of Britain,
TV. Oh, no.
where the German aim was to
Sir, I don't know
destroy
if you can hear us, but we've got
RAF
a technical problem at this end.
so as to threaten an invasion and
Yeah,
force
how
Britain to
do I do that?
negotiate terms for surrender.
Where's that chat?
Oh, where's the chat? Yeah, I mean,
Down there.
Red line is minus 0.5,
No kidding.
I know.
excuse me, minus 0.05,
you know,
and the green line is
Yeah, it's
plus 0.05, and those mark the difference between roughly 45% loss to 55%. The defender's advantage of the range from about 45% chance of winning to about 55% chance of winning. So anything between these two lines is basically a wash. No, neither side has any outstanding advantage. So, out of the 18 days that the battle started, there were only a few days that the Germans achieved any particular success, and even that was very mild. The British RAF had a great day that day. And by and large, as the graph shows, I think, that the RAF stubborn and very skillful defense was such that the Germans were prudent to call off the attack and then try to win by other means, which involved bombing of civilian and port facilities in order to try to starve Britain into subjection. Anybody that would try to use personnel strengths and losses for naval battles, of course, is crazy. But I'm crazy enough to try it. I don't like to use dictionaries of battles, but in this case, Budde's Krieg's lexicon had some naval battle data, and that's all I had available to me. And there, the battle data only goes up to about 1900. This would be the Russo-Japanese naval engagements. But what happens? Basically, the defender's advantage parameter, just like it is in land battles, is basically constant over the entire time period. And the bitterness versus the defender's advantage, again, doesn't really show any particular correlation. I conclude that they're uncorrelated and independent measures. So again, use the key to victory to further our analyses. The database scan is very important. The occasions where, according to the advantage parameter, one side or the other would win, but the database records the victor to the other side. What's going on there? Let me give you a couple of examples. One is Bunker Hill, Battle of Bunker Hill. Of course, the major part of the engagement was actually on Breed's Hill, but that doesn't matter. If you look at the advantage parameter, it says the defending colonials should win, but the database records it as a British attack victory. But then you look at what's going on. The battle started with the colonials very short of ammunition. That was why they were given the order, don't fire till they see the whites of their eyes. They couldn't waste any ammunition. They had to make every shot count. So what happened? The British went up the hill. They beaten back. So heavy losses. They reorganized. They tried again, beaten back, heavy losses. The colonials looked around and said, well, we haven't gotten any ammunition left, so we might as well leave. And what happened after that? The British went up the hill and enjoyed a self-guided tour of the previously held colonial positions. What happens is, it depends on when you end the battle as to who wins. And for my money, when the casualty production process stops, that's the end of the battle. Now the defender's advantage parameter involves only the strengths and the losses. So when the casualty production process stops, that fixes the defender's advantage parameter. And it doesn't matter who moves around after that. But that's also characteristic of every index that depends only on the strengths and losses. Let me give you another example. The Battle of White Plains, also during the American Revolutionary War. In White Plains, New York. The colonials were defending. The British attacked. They were beaten back, heavy losses. The two forces stood in their current positions for 2 whole days. No significant tactical activity. Then, because the British had asked for reinforcements, the reinforcements were on the way. It rained that night. Washington said, "Why stick around for the reinforcements?" So the way I read that battle is the first day the British lost. And then the British said, "Just stick around, fellas. Wait till we round up some reinforcements and we'll fight a second down." And Washington said, "No thanks, fellas. I got business elsewhere. See you later." So, although the historians tell me that the British won that, I don't believe it. In fact, if you use the analogous reasoning, you can reason that the Indians lost the Battle of Little Bighorn. Why? Because Custer attacked them from the east. Custer and his contingent was wiped out. There was still a contingent of the 7th Cavalry in place under Captain Benteen, I think about 40 people. They survived. And what happened was, from the west, General Crook came on the battlefield with much larger reinforcements, bigger weapons, including Gatling guns. And the Indians said, no, we'll take our gain and get out of here before Crook arrives, and we have to fight him. As a matter of fact, Custer has been very criticized strategically for not waiting until General Crook showed up on the west flank of the Indians. Anyway, the point is that you can use the same analogy as reasoning for White Plains and the Battle of Little Bighorn, and you get different answers as to who won. So the real factor, depending on who wins the battle, which is the battle, is the casualty exchange process, is taken into consideration by the defender's parameter, defender's advantage parameter. And it should be, can and should be used in many, many ways. The database has some other errors in it that were found by scanning through using the defender's advantage parameter and asking, is the reported victor correct? In one case, the database says that the Israelis won the battle on the Golan Heights, where they had an observation post. But what happened was that observation post was overrun very early in the battle by the Arabs. And I think assigning victory to the Israelis in that case is just it's a misprint in the battle data. But that's an example of what I mean by saying it can key more closer attention to the particulars of the battle, and there raise important questions as to whether the designation of the victor is correct or not. We can use it also. We're doing, and I have all these recommendations where it's used at the National Test Center, and start of an DARPA effort to provide our commanders with current information on their advantage parameters. I have some afterwards. In the book, let me back up a little bit. 30 years ago, in a meeting much like this, I said, why is Napoleon considered a great general? And the answer came back, because he won so many battles. And I asked, well, how did he win so many battles? And the answer came back, that's a dumb question. The answer obviously is because he is a great general. Another person who is attending, Alan Ream, if you know him, a fine fellow, unfortunately no longer with us. But he said, interjected a comment, he said, we have to find some other criteria for equality of generalship. Well, I have my defender's advantage parameter. Why not use that as the basis for rating commanders? It's at least it's objective and it's quantitative. Two major advantages. So I ginned up something and I said, well, we should use the defender's advantage parameter. We should penalize that somehow by the amount of losses that were taken. So we should penalize it by some version of the bitterness parameter. So I conjured up a proposed rating scheme based on those two factors. I didn't actually turn it around and calculate the ratings for any commanders, but some naval postgraduate student may have an interest in that. Personnel strength of man-hours and effort. When I started out in this business many years ago, everybody, I and everybody else, seemed to have in the back of their mind somehow a mental image of a military force as a kind of machine that would grind on and grind on. At some point, I said, well, that can't be right. And I took a leaf from Tolstoy's War and Peace, where he likens the military army to an animal. And Tolstoy talks about things like the animal, the great beast was wounded, the great beast was struggling. And I thought about that for a while, and I said, no, that really can't be quite right either. And so I finally, and I said, well, maybe we should visualize it as kind of a corporation. And like corporations do, they measure the amount of effort in terms of man-hours of effort. So maybe we should give up this idea of personnel strength and force ratios measured in personnel strength and talk about the amount of effort being exerted by this sort of corporate structure, the amount of effort devoted to creating casualties to the opponent. And I toyed around with that idea a little bit for the Battle of Waterloo. And it seemed like an interesting idea. I would not advertise it as anything more than an interesting idea. But again, some enterprising research personnel may want to take it up and follow the suggestion. I promise you that the approximation of log mu versus log fractional exchange ratio would be a very accurate approximation. Here's a chart that proves empirically that that's a very good approximation. I promised you that the approximation that the bitterness parameter would be approximately equal to the geometric mean of the fractional casualties to the attacker and defender. And there's a chart that shows that, in fact, empirically, it is indeed a very reasonable approximation. Okay, now all this that I found plus more can be found in the book that we started out with. It's available at Barnes and Noble and Amazon. Thank you. That concludes my presentation.
Thanks, Bob. Do you have any questions in the room?
How did you wind up using hyperbolic truth functions as the basis for your number?
I did not use the hyperbolic functions. Okay. I say that the solution to the Laplace equations can be most appropriately and informatively written in this form, where A is the surviving product of the attacker, D is the surviving product of the defendant. I use that to motivate my attention to the parameters mu and epsilon. After that, I didn't talk anymore about the hyperbolic function. That's all theory, and that's only motivation. What is important is the empirical finding, like this one. That's a fit to the actual data.
Right.